So I've been making these colorful crystals for a long time now. They don't look like this to the naked eye. This is using polarized light microscopy to bring out the colors from a property of the crystals called birefringence. And in this video, I'll show you how I make them. I'll keep a bunch of the images going so that you don't just have to listen to me ramble. And I'll encourage you to try this yourself. This works for a surprisingly large number of compounds. Most of the pictures you see here will be vitamin C, since that's one of the easiest and most vibrant, and still my favorite. But I've had lots of success with potassium dihydrogen orthophosphate and citric acid and many other, just about any new chemical that I buy for the lab, I test it out and see, and often they'll produce these incredible patterns. So the trick here is that you want to dissolve whatever it is that you're interested in growing crystals of into a little bit of water or ethanol. So for example, let's do this with vitamin C. I'll put a little sprinkle of the vitamin C on a glass microscope slide. And then I usually put a few drops of water, or in this case, I'll spritz on some 70% ethanol and put it on a hot plate because I'm impatient. And this will heat it up until all of the vitamin C is dissolved. You could also just make a saturated solution of whatever salt you're interested in. And then the whole thing with this process is that it's very experimental. So you can try different concentrations and dilutions. You can try heating it to evaporate it quickly or leaving it to evaporate it really slowly. In this case, once it's on the hot plate, just as the first crystals start forming, I take it off. If you just boil it off, you tend to get very white, uninteresting crystals. But if you let it cool a little bit more slowly, you can see these beautiful colors start to emerge. And then depending on the rate of evaporation, you get these different fringes and patterns. So for example, if I blow on it, you can see here and here are bands that had faster rates of evaporation because I was blowing over the slide while I took the video. So it's just really, really fun to watch. Often you can see the crystals growing even in real time, especially if you've been using any sort of heat. As it cools down on the microscope, you can watch the crystal front move forward. Or some of them, especially if you're using water as a solvent rather than ethanol, you leave them overnight and wake up in the morning to some beautiful surprises. I find these endlessly fascinating. You can try mixing different crystals for different effects. You'll also notice that some crystals have several different forms. So for example, citric acid, and will grow different types of crystal depending on the conditions. If it's heated and then cooled really fast or really slow, or if it's coming out of one solvent or another, you can get different crystal forms, different types of crystal lattice, and then once one of those forms is growing crystal, it's going to keep on adding in the same form. And you can kind of steer this in various ways with heat or with rate of evaporation and with different solvents. Mixtures of different compounds can sometimes give pure crystals of both in very interesting ways. Suddenly adding ethanol to things that aren't as soluble in a mixture of ethanol and water versus just plain water can cause very spindly crystals to crash out really rapidly. Adding solvents, again, once the crystal's on the slide and letting them redissolve can be quite mesmerizing. So it's really a whole space of exploration. I've even recently started trying to experiment with controlling where the crystals start to form by taking really, really clean, fresh microscope slides and scribing patterns in, both by hand. So here, this one was scratched out just manually with the edge of a cutting bit or something that I knew had a diamond coating. And then more recently, I've used a small industrial diamond mounted to the tip of my 3D printer to scribe some patterns. These are very hard to photograph, but you can see they sometimes start to have some influence over how the crystal forms or where the boundaries are as the liquid evaporates. So definitely not a perfect means of control, but fun to start having a little bit more creative input into the process. Anyway, I find this very meditative, very awe-inspiring to see the incredible structures that are always around us and existing in nature, but are often harder to see. And this polarized light really brings out the subtle, nuances of the crystal that you just can't see with the naked eye. I just such a fun art form to be able to sprinkle down some powder, and then 5 minutes later you're sitting at the microscope enthralled. So I would really encourage you to try it. You don't need anything fancy. A cheap student microscope and 2 pieces of polarizing film, very easy to acquire. I'll link some additional blogs and videos and things if you want to see the details of how to build that. For the rest of this video, I think I'll just include some of my favorite pictures from over the last year or two that I've been doing this. If you try this, please let me know. Tag me in some pictures so that I can see what crystals you've been growing. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.